Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Before we meet today's guest, we want to recognize our podcast partners. These are not financial arrangements, we just support each other. We coach the global community of women in high school sports, the Florida Coaches Coalition, and Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Um, these are four great organizations. You should add them to your network and connect with them. And now don't hit that fast forward button. Stay with us for the next 3 minutes as we recognize our podcast sponsors. These vendors are companies that I used as a coach or as an AD. You should use them too. Here we go. We want to thank Huddle for their support of the podcast. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. Huddle is going to provide your coaches, your teams, your athletes with the tools that they need to play at the highest level. It's going to be a complete professional grade solution for the challenges that we face as athletic directors. Go to huddle.com, see why we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 6 million users. Find out how to turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to thank Gipper. Go to Gipper.com, see how athletic directors are creating world-class content for their school social media channel. Mention our podcast, use the code ADPOD10, and you'll get 10% off. That's Gipper.com. Create custom content for your school's social media channel. We want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor scoring tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their tables and their scoreboards in action. They don't just raise income for your department, they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule that live web demo today. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're going to show you how to set up and sell tickets for all the events at your school, not just athletic events, but things like school plays and concerts, dances, even graduation. And the best part, you'll have a dedicated client success manager that's providing you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com right now. Simple and easy online ticketing. We also want to thank Snap Mobile. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their entire suite of platforms designed to help you do your job better. You've got Snap Connect, Snap Store, Snap Manage, and of course, there's Snap Raise, their fundraising platform that we used with great success, and so will you. They even have a program where you can get your funding before you actually start your fundraiser. I don't think anyone else offers that. Go to snapraise.com and get started. Snapraise.com. We also want to say thanks to Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. The Wall of Fame is an interactive touchscreen video console that's going to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present, in academics, athletics, and the arts. But it's also an extensive content program that's going to help you tell more compelling stories to better engage your audience. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com/Jake and get your Wall of Fame today. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack. Athletic surveys are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic department. ADs usually only hear back from that 2%, the squeaky wheel parent or the frustrated student athlete. And we need to hear back from them so we can affect positive changes in our programs. But we also need to hear back from the 98% that love and support our program. And that's where athletic surveys comes in. They can create a custom survey for your school, allowing you to take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. And that's tremendously valuable information to have. Go to athleticsurveys.com, see how they can help you. That's athleticsurveys.com. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're staying right here in Florida today, and we've got a really cool guest. Our guest is Morgan Jones. Morgan is a former Division I athlete at Florida State, outstanding basketball player, played professionally. In the years since graduation, she's become a consultant, an entrepreneur, a speaker on a national level. She has her own website. That's morganmjones.com. We're going to talk about that later. And she's going to talk about transforming athletes to visionaries. I'm excited to hear her share. Morgan Jones, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jake. I'm excited to be here.
Well, again, we were talking before we started to record. We connected on LinkedIn. I thought you'd be a great guest for our listeners. So let's go and jump right into it. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that bio, where you were born, where you grew up. We certainly want to hear about your high school and your college days, and then we'll probably take a little break. But what's the Morgan Jones origin story?
Ooh, the origin story. I love the way you put that. So I was born in Rockledge, Florida, and I have a sister who is 2.5 years older than me. So it's just her and I. And I'm biracial. So my mother's Caucasian and my dad is African American. My parents have been married 30 years, and basketball started for me in the YMCA. Those are the earliest memories that I have, playing in co-ed leagues. You know, I can remember watching my sister on the sidelines initially and was not very interested in it. I was more interested in playing hide and seek at the Y, or, you know, just everything else but basketball, right? As a young, 5, 6, 7-year-old girl. And, but watching my sister and just seeing how much she loved the game and the friendships she was able to develop and the sense of belonging that sports looked like it provided, I started getting engaged in it. And my parents were the coaches, and my parents have always been my coaches. So I do have that experience of being coached by parents. They had an AAU organization called DEBO, so it's DEBO, where it was one of the first female athletes, only girls programs that were around at the time. They had 4 teams. We traveled the country on recruiting circuits. And basketball was in my life, whether I wanted it to be or not. And so I was super grateful to have 2 parents that really showed the example through action. I was one of the many different athletes that went on to the collegiate level. And that was just the norm, was to excel and make it to the college level and get a college scholarship. And so in middle school, I was actually not very good. I remember the days when I used to sit on the bench, and after the games, I used to wonder, why not me? Why did I not get in? Am I not good enough? What do I need to do to be better? Is this game really for me? I remember in 8th grade that happening, and it really shifted my perspective, because no one likes to be sidelined.
Right.
And I put a lot of work into the game. I started doing overtime, putting a lot of hours in the gym, and setting very distinct and often lofty goals. So I remember going into, my dad used to have this blog. There wasn't Instagram or Twitter or any of that back when I played. But there was like a blog where parents could go on to a site and they could just talk about the different athletes in the area. And I walked into the room and I told my dad, I said, "Hey Dad, I really want to be a great basketball player. And so I want to be a top 10 player in the country by the time I graduate high school." And this was my 8th grade going into 9th grade year. And as any dad hopefully would say, even though it sounded really crazy, he was like, "Okay, let's do it. We got to put in the work, but you can do it." And so I started that journey of just showing up and doing what I was supposed to do and working really hard. And from that point, I went from like number 30th player in the country, a sophomore, to by the time I finished my junior year, I was the number 9th player in the country, which afforded me opportunities to be a McDonald's All-American, a USA Olympic invitee, over 100 plus Division I scholarships, and then, obviously been able to go to the next level and get my schooling paid for. So that's some of my origin story, kind of pieced together the best I could with it, about a minute and a half.
No, that's what we want to hear. I'm curious. I had the opportunity to, coach our three kids. My daughters, when they were much younger, then it became better that I wasn't coaching them. And then our son, in football. What's your memory? I'm guessing it was pretty positive of being coached, by your dad. Were there ever any moments where you the standard response is, hey, I need you to be a dad, not a coach. How did he balance that? What's your memory of that?
Mm. So I don't have, so it was my mom and my dad. They coached together, they
Okay.
ran the program together. And I, again, I was just one of 60. I think prior to me, there was 30 girls that went on to college. And so my parents never really, I guess, put too much pressure on me because they knew what they were doing was bigger than just my journey. And I was able to witness that. And my parents did a really great job at once the game was over, it was over. I don't ever remember like them in the car, yelling at me or, making me feel any pressure or like taking things from me because of my performance. I never had that relationship with them. I know there's a lot of parents out there nowadays that really go to the extreme to get their children to perform how they want them to. That wasn't my situation, and so I'm really fortunate that my experience of being coached by my parents was positive.
And again, that's what we would hope, for all of our student athletes, that they can have that experience, whether their parents are coaching them or not. We talk as athletic directors about the ride home. Let's make the ride home, a positive experience, whether you were coaching or not. Great message there. Let's jump forward. You had a tremendous college career. We'll talk about your pro experience later, but what are some things that stick out for you from your collegiate playing days?
Wow. So for my collegiate playing days, some of the things that stuck out were one, I started off at Northwestern University, which is in Chicago in the Big Ten. So I had the opportunity there to play with my sister, who I mentioned earlier. She was a guard at Northwestern, and so her and I playing together was definitely a memory that stuck out, very unique. Um, Also, being at Northwestern University and being surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the world and educators was really, really cool. I took a class, um, a how Walt Disney and Disney World started, like talk about origin story, right? And we just went so deep into animation and it was fascinating. So I loved that. And then at Florida State, which I transferred to after my first year, that was a really great experience because FSU has a culture of excellence. They in terms of our sporting expectations, they're really high, so I felt like I got a really rich experience there. Our football team was the national champions, and we went into when I went into Florida State, my goal has always been, let me back up a little bit. I love the underdog. That is, I just love the underdog. I'm always gonna choose them. I'm always gonna root for them. That's just me. So when I transferred to Florida State, or when I was transferring, I knew I wanted to be a part of a program that wasn't fully established. Like meaning you have your UConns or you go to schools that they consistently are in the top 15 or top 5 programs in the world in the country. I was like, I want to go into a program, then be just okay, and then take them to being great.
Right.
Um, and so in choosing Florida State, I saw that potential there. And so when I arrived, we were unranked and we were at the bottom of the ACC. And by the time I left, we were top 5 in the country. We made it to the NCAA Elite Eight. And so we lost to South Carolina to go to the Final Four. So along that journey of, making it to that level in the collegiate ranks comes a lot of perks, of really cool experiences. We went to Africa, we've been to Italy. I got to play with, really incredible players, awesome teammates, and be coached by really strong women. Coach Sue Semerau and Brooke Wyckoff were, the leaders of the program and the team. And, it's one of those things when I was under their leadership at the time, you don't really see it fully. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners are may look back, and even you, Jake, right? Like all the lives you've touched. when do you see the fruits of that, right? Like when can you actually see how it's changed your life? And so now I reflect on that often of how unique and cool that was to have such powerful women leading me in my collegiate life.
Yeah, as I was doing my research for this interview, Florida State, great website. They have archived some of their web posts, and there's several there where Coach Semrau is commenting on you and your leadership and your growth from sophomore to junior to senior. That had to be a great experience. And you mentioned one of the things that stuck out for me as a memorable event was when you took that trip to Africa. Can you maybe share a little bit with our listeners about that?
Yeah, it was incredible. We got the opportunity through Nike has a program that they do where every 4 years, Power Five Division One schools can go overseas. So ideally, like every athlete would get an opportunity to compete overseas, and so typically teams go overseas to play in one country. They go there for like 10 days or so. And Coach Sue Semrau in our program decided to break it up. And so we did, I think, 6 days in Africa and then the other 6 in Italy. So we had both experiences. But um, it was so humbling. It was so enriching. We just driving in the town, in the city, we went to Senegal and just to see the conditions that they live in and the gratitude that they have with the conditions that they live in, being able to visit orphanages and hearing from the instructors and the leaders that all they need is to be held, and we had the opportunity to do that. Going on a real safari, not like a Disney World like safari, like a real safari where there's like real giraffes and rhinos. I mean, the instructors on the trucks, there was open doors, so it is similar like the one at Disney, but they actually kind of like said you can get out. And they were like, yeah, you can get out. Yeah, like the giraffe's only 15 feet up the way. Yeah, you can get out. He won't attack you. And I'm like, okay, like I'm kind of a risk taker. So I'm like, cool. But overall, just an incredible experience being able to be there and then compete against Senegalese women. And when I say women, I mean women. They had kids, they had families, and they were so strong. I don't think I've ever played against such powerful, strong women that, quite frankly, Jake, they wiped us out. Like they, they killed us. Rightfully so. They're like, this American team's coming in here. We're going to show them what's up. So it was an incredible experience, something that I'll never forget.
They're looking at you and say, "Get out of here, kid." Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Oh, wow. Very cool stuff. Thanks for sharing that. For our listeners, our guest today is Morgan Jones, former college professional athlete, now an entrepreneur. We're going to hear more about that when we come back. Let's go and take our first break. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Huddle for their support of the podcast. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. Huddle provided our coaches, our student athletes, with the tools that they needed to perform at the highest level. It was a professional grade solution for the challenges that we all face. Go to huddle.com and see why we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 6 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. Go to Gipper.com and see how athletic directors are creating world-class marketing content for their school's social media channel. You can do it in seconds, and you don't need any design training. Use our podcast code ADPOD10, and you'll get 10% off. That's Gipper.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest is Morgan Jones. Morgan, again, you had an outstanding career collegiately, and then you also had the opportunity to play professionally. I always tell the joke, which is true, injuries and a lack of talent kept me out of the NFL. But, you obviously had the talent to play at that next level. So share a little bit about that experience.
Playing professionally was the dream, Jake. It was the dream. It's what, you set out to play a sport, and first it's friendship, it's belonging, it's, identity forming, and then, you move into the next stage of, really competing, and then you're looking at the what the future could look like if you stayed committed. And the goal eventually gets to go to college, and then when that gets certain, then it's like, hey, let's go to the pros. And so, I feel like the professional level was like, I'm here. Like, I almost want to like stand on top of the mountain and go, I did it, I made it. And so it was really cool. It was really rewarding, in the sense that I played in Puerto Rico professionally, and that is a very strong league across women basketball, and really immersed in the culture. Got to eat steak and beans and rice and learn a little Espanol and compete. You played one or two games a week, and you practice every day, and you played with locals. They really, really love women's basketball over there. A lot of fans. And so it was a really unique experience, to say the least. It was interesting though, because as you guys know, and I'm sure your listeners know as well, is that women's basketball, women's sports, we're really trying to reveal all the incredible things, that we have to offer, and how entertaining our game can be. And so, the professional level isn't quite, to the standard of where the men are. College sports with Title IX, that makes a lot of our experience very similar to the men. But when you get to the professional level, it's really all about how much is the team producing, is it making money, etc. So, some of the living conditions weren't ideal for sure. I lived like in almost like a shopping plaza where we opened the doors. No one can probably see me, but you like opened two double doors and you like walked in, and there was no windows, cement floors, maybe like a 3x4 shower, didn't get hot. And, so the conditions weren't ideal. And then the, competing was a little bit different. Let me explain that a little bit. So the basketball is basketball, but the more you climb the ladder and get better at the game, the more it becomes a business. And what I don't think that youth sports, or, the kind of the journey of sports, doesn't really inform the athlete too much of, is like, when does that switch over to a business? And when it does switch over to a business, how do you now need to operate? That's a tricky thing that I think now they're implementing more with NIL, but it needed to be back then, because everything was based on the ways in which I put the ball in the basket. If I didn't put the ball in the basket, I wasn't of much value to my team. And so if you did not have a good game, you were threatened to go home and not be able to, contract would just be terminated. So there was a lot of pressure there, a lot of self-reflection of like, how much do I still love this game? Is this still the thing that I want to do? I'm away from home, different, cultural, experiences that were good and very uncomfortable too. So I was playing with my team consistently, very like well, and I got to a point where I had a couple bad games in a row, and the coach came into the locker room after one of the games, and they speak Spanish. So what happens when you're in the locker room is the coach will say everything, and then the one teammate that knows is bilingual will come over and explain it to you. And the coach was just yelling. He was just yelling. And I'm like, oh, and then all of a sudden he'd be yelling, and then I would hear Morgan, Morgan, and then he'd go back to Spanish. And I'm like, oh, he's saying something about me here. So my teammate came over to me and said, coach said that if you don't score the ball, you're going home. And it was kind of like this very simple statement that really set in a way of like, really had me look at my love for it, if I had it anymore. My value, like, man, is that really my value? Am I more than this? Because now I'm here. There's not much else where to go. I'm here, and I'm threatened to be sent home anymore. Do I still want to be motivated by that? And so, the next game they ended up letting me go. But ironically, the week that they let me go is the same week they had the All-Star game for the league. And so I had been asked to compete in that. And so I was not on any team. I was going in as a free agent, if you will. And I went into the All-Star game, and I just like told myself and my friend that was there at the time, I'm like, if this is how I'm going to go out, oh, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out how I want to go out. And so, I just got out there, I played really hard. I shot every shot. And I ended up getting MVP of the game, of the All-Star game, right? And so there was this moment, Jake, where like I'm not on a team, I'm a free agent, and literally I have to stand in the middle of the court with everyone watching as I hold these trophies with the owners of the league and all of this stuff, and just kind of have this really gratifying moment of like, all right, this is how I'm going to go out. So what I did from there is obviously I performed really well. So I got asked to play on another team and another contract. And that was a really hard decision for me because I was already mentally a little bit done.
Right.
But then I said, if I take this one more week, I get my check, right? I get paid for this week. I'm like, why don't I just have my family, like fly my family to Puerto Rico and let's just have a good time. And let's like close out this whole professional basketball career thing together. And so I flew my family into Puerto Rico. I played with this team for 1 week. And then after that, like I went home, and that was the conclusion of my athlete journey, is really kind of leaving on my terms with the people that I love, that I started the journey with. And and then looking and seeing, okay, now the world has opened up so much. Who am I? What do I want to do? And how do I move forward?
Well, what a great way to go out. I don't think everybody gets that opportunity at any level, high school, college, or pro. Was there any conversation or any, look across the court at your coach from your previous team as you're holding that MVP hardware? Huh?
Oh man. There wasn't a specific look. Um, it was almost like all of the presence and what happened did its own heavy lifting.
Right. Yeah. Nothing
Yeah.
needed
So
to be
no
said.
specific moment. Nope.
Yeah. All right. I've got a question for you. So we're going off script here. Okay. And certainly you're not expected to, be the arbiter of all things women's international sports, but here we go. Um, you made the comment, and I think it's very true that, Puerto Rico and even worldwide, I think, women's professional sports very much appreciated and enjoyed by the other countries. And anybody that watched the NCAA, Final Four or the tournament for women this year, you saw some great basketball, huge crowds, huge ratings, and you're right, the product, the basketball is great. The WNBA, it's still catching up. The NBA has been around for a lot longer, so I think people sometimes forget about that. But here's my question: Puerto Rico, Latin American country, I'm probably, breaking all kinds of, politically correct rules here, but I think kind of a male, dominated culture historically. Why are women's sports, and we can talk basketball, why is women's basketball so much more accepted and embraced in other countries than in the United States? Do you have an answer for that? Or an explanation, not an answer?
I can speak for basketball.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, and I'm just thinking like probably like, yeah, that. I'm thinking the US is known, so like the NBA is the US's like sport, right? Like I mean there's NFL, yes, but the NBA is like such a big deal here. And I think the WNBA is obviously behind in years, right? Like they're almost 20 years off from conception, so they're catching up. But I think that our culture puts just a ton of value on how things produce revenue.
Right.
Like if it's not making money, then it's not entertaining, it's not interesting, or it should be like the men, where the men are dunking. Like there's just this like status complex we have here that is way more intensified than it is in other countries. that may be a stretch, right? But it doesn't seem as like dominant over there in terms of like something has to be making a ton of money in order to be deemed as valuable. Um, so I would say that that has something to do with it. That
I think you're right.
um,
Mhm.
is definitely changing. Um, but primarily, I think that that has a part of it. That's the stance I'll take today.
No, no, and I think that that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I was thinking in the other countries, and again, they have their pro leagues, whatever, but maybe it's not to the extent that it's here in the United States, and that they can just appreciate, hey, these are great athletes. These are men, these are women, and we just love sport, which I think is how it should be. And again, talking about the WNBA and the NBA, I saw a figure, and I'm probably going to blow this. And I know we're really getting into the weeds here, but I think the NBA makes $10 billion every year in revenue, and the WNBA is still operating at a $10 million a year loss, each year. But we can see it getting more popular and doing better. All right, we're going to come out of the weeds. Okay. Uh, our guest for our listeners is Morgan Jones, college professional athlete, successful entrepreneur. We're going to hear about what she has done with her business, her consulting, her speaking business after our break. But let's take another break. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards for their support of the podcast. You've heard me say before, one of the best purchases I ever made as an athletic director was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Of course, we used it for home games, but we also used it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. Their products are tremendously versatile, and the customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com, schedule a live web demo, and see their tables and their boards in action. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to thank Hometown Ticketing for their support. Go to hometownticketing.com, and they're going to show you how to set up and sell tickets for your events, not just athletic events, but things like school plays, concerts, dances, even graduation. And the best part, you're going to have a dedicated client success manager that's providing hands-on support every step of the way. That's hands-on support to you every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com and get started today. Simple and easy online ticketing. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Morgan, one of the things that I really enjoy about the podcast is having our guests share some of the mentors that they've had in their lives. None of us get to where we're at on our own. So who are some of the people that have helped you along the way?
Wow. I've had really great mentors. And I think mentors is always interesting because I think it's like, okay, what is a mentor? How do they operate? How does this go? And so the people that I consider mentors are people that um, either said the right thing when I needed it the most, showed up in my life when I needed someone there, um, and then a person that I can call on to give sound advice. So I've had quite a few of them that have helped guide me in different areas of my life. Not just basketball, right? Not just entrepreneurship, but relationships, spirituality. That has made me just more of a complete person. So I think, going off of what we had mentioned about Florida State and Coach Sue Summerall and Coach Brooke Wyckoff, they're both really incredible mentors of mine. And I say that because they, during my journey at Florida State, they were always present for me. And then just to see how they're still in my life and support my work now and support who I am and continue to draw me in and help me and provide resources where necessary. it's really awesome. They're really great relationships, and there's something that there's no dollar sign for them. So they've been great, and then I've had a lot of really sound men, business owners and professional athletes that have come in and just given me really great nuggets to just keep me hopeful and keeping me to just take the next step. What is just the next step? And I had one, Brandon Marshall. He is a former NFL athlete, Pro Bowler, and I remember calling him right when I was transitioning careers and just kind of figuring out how to go about really being an entrepreneurship. And I came from a family of entrepreneurship. My mom was a business owner as well. And I was at this crossroad of, do I start my own or do I fall into the family business? And I had a desire to really take the risk and start my own, but I felt like he would be a great person. And so I called him and I was just sharing with him, and he didn't tell me one way or the other. But what he did say is, Morgan, don't, if you start now and you build the life that you really want and you're doing something you love, you're going to turn around at 35, 37, realize you're living the life of your dreams. Like, so don't focus on money, focus on doing what you love and building what you love. And, that was 8, 9 years ago. And here I am. So I think just the right advice at the right time. And, he's still a mentor to me today and cheers me on as he sees, his advice unfolding in my life.
I love that whole theme, and it makes me think very much back to something my dad told me. My dad was a contractor, and my brothers and I, we got to work for him growing up. Uh, and I just hated every minute of it. But I think I was probably 8th or 9th grade. I was probably griping about something on the job site. And he said, Jake, the secret to happiness is finding something that you love to do and then convincing somebody else to pay you to do that. And he had found that in his career as a contractor. He loved every minute of it. And fortunately, I was able to find that with teaching and coaching and being an athletic director. So I'm very much with you on that. Living your best life, loving what you do, and you still got a long way to go. So that's great that you could find that.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. Love that.
Um, let's go ahead and talk about what you're doing right now. As I mentioned, you're a very successful speaker. You speak to a lot of companies, businesses, teams. You're in demand as a consultant. You have your own company. I think I'm going to let you talk about that, but two things that really jumped out to me as I was looking at your website, the athletes to visionaries, and then the vision box. So talk a little bit, if you can, about both of those. And again, share with our listeners why they should go to your website.
Absolutely. So the vision, so at first it started off as, we talked about it. So it's great that you guys understand the backstory a little bit. So when I transitioned out of professional athletics, there was this gap period of about a year where I had realized so much of my identity was in my sport. I had really, really no idea of like how to forge a path forward if it wasn't about the next practice, the next game, and my cheerleaders of coaches, teammates, fans, classmates, etc. So it led me back home on the couch with mom and dad driving Uber, figuring out what do I want to do. And it was kind of a low point. I've definitely turned to things that, most people do when they're trying to distract themselves, and did not find any fulfillment in there. And luckily I knew what fulfillment looked like. So what I started to do was contact some of my former teammates that had transitioned and were now out of sports. And I said, man, do you guys feel like we were prepared for this? Like, we went from 5-star hotels, staying at Ritz-Carlton, flying private jets, and all of a sudden I'm like on mom and dad's couch, like in this like sales job where I'm making $12 an hour and like selling apartments. And okay, cool, I guess. And I found this common theme that a lot of athletes do not feel prepared for life after sports. And there was a gap there. That I was like, I wonder if I could help athletes not necessarily find a job, because that's not really what it's about, but it's really like discovering who they are without this sport, like getting back to the essence of who they are prior to everything that happened in the conditioning of being an athlete. And um that's kind of where like this idea of like being an athlete where it's pretty limited in a sense, like it's very much a label and a lot of biases around it. And then how do we become like a visionary where we have like bold and original ideas about what our future can and will be like? And so it started off as just like, how can we transform those beliefs, right? Or that thought process or that identity? Um, and I started speaking about it. So I would just go and like ask my old high school, like, hey, can I come and speak? And I would go into the portables and talk to 30 athletes, and I just started serving it and like coming up with different ways to communicate it. And I found like everyone was kind of like, yeah, I don't know if basketball stopped right now, who I would be and what I would do. So that's the origin of Athletes to Visionaries. And then I kept growing on speaking it. And then it turned into events where we had a sold out event here in Orlando where we did it just for female athletes. And we had the athletes, the parents, and the coaches in attendance. And we had this unified message of, who are you beyond the game? What is your vision for your life? And so that event went really well. Once we finished the event, we had a recap video, and that video went to some really key decision makers in the apparel industry. And we were on our way to, representing one of these brands in their Women's Month initiative. And NCAA Final Four picked up our event. And so things were going really well. We're like, oh, we're onto something, like Athletes and Visionaries, like, let's go. Then comes the pandemic. So everything shut down. We had to cancel events, and we're back all stuck in the house at just really, really hard times. And so me being who I am, I was like, I had my couple months where I just sat in the reality of what was happening in our world. And then I quickly was like, but we got to figure something out. Like, we can't just stop helping people. We can't stop serving this mission. We can't stop, spreading hope and possibility to people. And that's where the Vision Box was born. So it was born of like piecing together different tools that can help people create a new and more profound vision for their life, being somewhere where you're not totally comfortable, and then how do we get you to where you want to be. And a vision board was a huge part of my journey in defining who I am and the impact that I want to have and the woman that I want to become. And it's manifested in ways where I'm just 100% believer in creating vision boards around the things you want. And so I basically kitted that and I put that into the Vision Box. And so a Vision Box is a toolkit that helps you create a powerful vision for your life, helps you get focused, re-energized, and reimagine what the future can look like. So that's how those two have come together. They've continued to transform because in entrepreneurship, you got to stay with the times and you got to keep the mission and the vision at the center, but make sure you're adapting. So it's then transitioned into a program for high level athletes who are transitioning out of sports. So we help them emotionally transition. It's turned into retreats. So we have retreats for athletes, former athletes, on how to tell your story powerfully in a way that inspires others. And we use the Vision Box with all of that. So, Athletes to Visionaries, it served over 5,000 female or high-level athletes. And it's growing, every day. So why you should go to my website? Because there's a lot of really cool resources and tools, and me, all there. And it's really something where, Jake and everyone that's listening, it's authentic, and the people that you lead right now, they want nothing more than to be in front of people who love what they do so they can start to believe in what they feel like they love to do. It's, every person right now wants to feel seen, wants to feel heard. And so, experiencing any part of my brand, Athletes to Visionaries, the Vision Box, or me speaking is going to put the power back in them and inspire them to ignite and take control of their future.
Well, I'm glad you made that mention of the website. We'll do this again at the end, but if our listeners wanted to visit the website or even reach out and connect with you, what's the best way they can do that? Go ahead and give out that website and then maybe your contact info.
Absolutely. MorganMJones.com. Instagram, it's Visions with Mo. So Visions, WITHMO. And my email is morgan@morganmjones.com.
Okay. Again, Morgan Jones, entrepreneur, former athlete, visionary. We'll get that information out again at the end of the podcast, but let's take another quick break. We've got more coming up. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Snap Mobile for their support of the podcast. Go to snapraise.com and you're going to find an entire suite of platforms designed to help you as an AD do your job better. You've got Snap Manage, Snap Connect, Snap Store, and also Snap Raise, their fundraising platform. We use Snap Raise at our school with great success, and it'll work for you too. They even have a program where they will give you your funding before you actually start your fundraiser. I don't think anybody else offers that. Go to snapraise.com and check out all the ways that they can help you. That's snapraise.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest is Morgan Jones. Morgan, you talked a little bit in the previous segment about the Vision Box. And again, I had already mentioned it was really intriguing to me. Share, if you can, a little bit more about that and how our listeners could take, better advantage of that and the services you provide with your website.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Vision Box it's a fantastic tool to be able to really ignite your team's vision and your values and really get direction on the way you want your season to go. Right now, I know right now some of you coaches may be, working or coaching, Gen Zs, right? Is that where you're at, Jake? Is it Zs? Is it Ls, MPs? I don't know sometimes.
You should know this. Okay.
Yeah, right. I should know, but I think it's Gen Z. So, they're just growing up in a different time. Everything is digital. They have that phone in front of their faces, 3 to 6 hours a day, just creating TikToks and videos and also being consumed a lot with other people's content. And a lot of influences are coming their way of who they should be, how they should operate, how they should act, what their goals should be, that I think Gen Z is going to, that's going to be a little bit of a struggle for them in terms of identity, and then getting really focused on the direction that they want their life, their role on your team, or their values and what they're good at, their talents, their skills. Like that's going to be a harder thing for them to pinpoint because there's so many other influences around them. They're always comparing themselves to who's on the internet or what has the most likes and follows. So in talking about that issue, right, it's like, so then what could be a potential solution or a tool that could help them with that? And the Vision Box is that, because it is a box that has all the tools to be able to help them define their values. So for coaches, what I suggest is saying, have them really understand their role on the team and what they want for themselves for that season. The same way you have your team vision and your team values, each one of your players should have a vision for their role on the team and how they're going to stick to the values that they choose as the point guard, as the wide receiver, as the left hitter, and be able to visually have a reminder of that throughout the season can make a real impact. And it's almost like a tool for you too to keep your athletes accountable to what they said they would do, their goals, right, their values, their vision. It's something that they're going to need as they leave from up underneath your leadership, is knowing how to set goals for themselves, how to stay true to who they are, how to pull themselves out of, emotional and mental ruts, right? So I think the Vision Box is really great. And I also say that because, through my consulting and, my partnering with really great organizations, we just did an agreement, a collaboration partnership with the WNBA. And so the WNBA is utilizing the Vision Box across all of their Her Time to Play initiative, which is going out to about 6,000 young women across the nation, girls basketball players, and coaches are going to help facilitate a team vision board for them. So It's going to be really awesome. It's spreading a lot of really good, awareness and connection, emotionally, mentally, and then practically.
Yeah, again, I just see so many different applications for athletic directors and coaches. Very cool stuff. Again, I appreciate you sharing that. One more time, let's give out that website so our athletic directors, our listeners can connect and find out more.
Yeah, so the Vision Box's website is thevisionbox.com. We were lucky enough to grab that URL. So it's thevisionbox.com, and then my website is morganmjones.com.
Okay. Morgan Jones. We're going to be back with some more. So, listeners, please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thank you to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. They're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. The Wall of Fame is an interactive touchscreen video console that's going to highlight the performances of your students, athletic, academic, and in the arts, but it's a lot more than that. The Wall of Fame is also an extensive content program that allows you to tell more compelling stories to better engage your audience. To find out more, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their great products, and when you're ready to buy, use the link vitalsignswalloffame.com/Jake to get a nice discount. Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Check out their products today. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Morgan, one of the topics that we've used almost since the very beginning has to do with this idea of toughness. Now, 100 years ago, when I was in high school, our coaches would say things like, come on, Jake, you got to be tough, or come on, Jake, you got to suck it up. And I think we kind of knew what they meant, and we did it. In the many years since I was in high school, I think we've figured out much better ways to communicate with student athletes. But I still think that toughness is an important aspect of sports and of life. So here's my question for you. How can a coach or an AD or a leader help a Generation Z kid to develop toughness while also being sensitive to and aware of the many challenges that they're facing now that I never had to go through back in my day? Do you have any advice for us?
Yes, I do. I think I don't think that, the way we build toughness, the way that you were mentioning how to build toughness, I think is very similar to how we need to build toughness now. I don't know if there's a huge difference. It's definitely something that is, on the inside of every person, and it's up to the coach to know how to pull it out. I think that there's a couple ways to do that. And one, what I have found is that, everything is so accessible to Gen Z. Information's accessible. They're always on their phones. They have their friends. They've got everything they need, right? They think they do. So I like to look at it as, how can you manufacture adversity? So you can really understand, one, where do your athletes stand from a toughness standpoint? If you're passive about when you're inserting something that will bring up adversity, then you're not necessarily paying attention to what's happening to your team during those moments. You'll learn more about your athletes and who has a higher threshold, who is your toughest player on the field, on the court. And so I would say that a manufacturing adversity is something to consider, right? I've obviously always stay safe, right? But notice when you're putting something in that's making to see where they're at. I had a coach in college, our strength and conditioning coach. Our preseason in college is something that, it's not something they're not the brightest of my moments in college. But I can remember being on the line, and we had to do these sevens, and you had to go down and back 7 times. And I was on my last one, and I remember feeling like there's no way I'm going to do this. Like, this must be a joke that they think that we're actually going to finish this. And my strength and conditioning coach just reassured me, you can do this, Morgan, you can do this. Ready? Go. And in the back of my mind, I knew if I didn't complete this, I was coming back at 6 a.m. the next day, right? Talk about manufacturing adversity or having to make that decision. All of a sudden, I hit a second wind. I hit a second stride. And was it the getting up at 6 a.m. that pushed me or what? But I finished it. I somehow got to that line. And it showed myself, honestly, that it's almost like I lifted up another ceiling of my potential. Like something that I thought I couldn't do in my brain, I convinced myself I could do, or they manufactured something to make me feel like I could, and now I know I can do that. So now I'm tougher. I can handle more. And when it's the last seconds in the game, I know that my mind may be telling me you're too tired to keep going, but I've had this experience of otherwise. So it's kind of seeing how can you manufacture that. And then the second thing that I would say is connection is so important that people work hard for the people that they know care about them.
Right.
Find ways to connect with your athletes because they will run through the wall if they know you care.
Well, I think you hit on all the key components there. We'll talk about the last one, that connection, the relationships. Back in the day, a long time ago when I was in high school, our coaches didn't think, talk, or worry about being connected or having a relationship with us. It just wasn't done. But they did have a relationship. We knew that they cared about us. We also knew they were going to work our tails off to help us get better. And nowadays, I think we have to, we need to explain to our student athletes, okay, this is why we're going to do this. But you talked about yourself in your situation. That coach said you can do that. So there's that equal parts, kicking in the butt and patting on the back and for each individual athlete and finding out, what's the best way to help this kid, this student athlete or this adult get better. So great stuff. Appreciate you sharing that. This has just been so cool. I was hoping, I knew it was going to be a great interview, but I was hoping it was going to be great, but it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing with us, but we're not done yet. We always wrap up with the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're not an athletic director, but you certainly know your way around the world of athletics. So we're going to take our final break here from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor this segment. When we come back, we're going to find out what Morgan Jones is going to put into her new athletic director toolbox. Please stay with us. We want to thank Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment of the podcast. Athletic Surveys are a quick and easy way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic directors typically only hear back from that 2%, the squeaky wheel parent or the frustrated student athlete. And we need to hear back from them so we can affect positive change. But we also need to hear back from the 98% that really love and support our program. And that's where Athletic Surveys comes in. They're going to connect you with your student athletes and your parents, let you take the pulse of those groups. That's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking to that squeaky wheel parent or your school board or your principal. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Let them help you put together a custom survey for your school. That's athleticsurveys.com. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been visiting with Morgan Jones, former college and professional athlete, now a very successful entrepreneur and speaker. But right now I'm going to challenge her to send out a brand new athletic director on the very first job, and I'm only going to let her put 3 things in their toolbox. Morgan, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
The 3 items that are going to go into my athletic director toolbox is going to be number 1, listen to your people. Number 2, hire people who don't look like you. And number 3,
I know there's so many things you would want to put
my
into a
gosh,
toolbox.
right? Like what would be the thing? So I said, listen to your people, hire people who don't look like you, and you know, don't be afraid to create okay, so I would say the third thing is creating athlete centered. How do I say this, Jake? I'm sorry, all the listeners. What I'm trying to say is, and I'm just going to talk it, and then we can like pull out what the actual point is.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's important to listen to your people and like listen more than you speak. It's important to hire people that don't look like you, because we all do that, whether we see it or not. And your athletes need diverse people that look like them or don't look like them coaching them. So make sure you hire diversely. And then the third one is don't be afraid to create things where your athletes have advocacy over different decisions that are being made, or like make sure that their voices are heard. So creating a space where athletes can come together and have real conversations about things that are happening in their communities, and creating that safe space is huge for your organization to stay connected and empowered. And the last thing would be to go ahead to morganmjones.com, and you can book me directly to work with your coaches and your leaders with the Connected Leader, Connected Coach workshop or keynote. And then I can also work with your athletes to Visionaries, either keynote where I speak for an hour, or a workshop, which can be anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, which is really highly engaging. We have live demonstrations, we do role playing, and it's really impactful to connect your entire department in ways that are meaningful and can ignite the conversation and change you want to see.
I love it. And I love the way you got that fourth one in there. I wrote down your third tool. I'm looking at our toolbox matrix right now, and I'm trying to see if it's which category it's going to fit in, because I love it. It's a great tool. Or is it going to be one of our unique tools that someone hasn't mentioned in quite that way yet? So it's definitely going to be in the toolbox. Morgan, one more time. We know the website, morganmjones.com. If somebody wants to email you directly, pick your brain. And listeners, I think you got a great resource here. What's the best way they can get a hold of you?
Morgan@morganmjones.com.
Okay. Morgan Jones, thanks again for sharing today on the podcast, and all the best moving forward.
Yes, thank you, Jake. I really appreciate it. And all the listeners, thank you.
Oh, you bet. For our listeners, we do this just about every day, and we upload the Zoom recordings to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you tuning in. Come back next time for another great interview, and just about every day for new content on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time.